Hi, welcome to the first class of Secrets of the Nakshatras. I'm Barry Rosen. Um, Many of you, may just be kind of interested in learning a little bit about Nakshatras today, which we'll do that. Some of you may be thinking of taking my class, which will officially start in 2 weeks. This is really the first class because the first class should be the ocean in a drop. So we're going to have a lot of overview material of a lot of the things that we can cover, and we'll learn some things about Nakshatras today too. And looking forward to kind of working with you all. I usually start my classes with some traditional Vedic chanting. Usually if I do that, then everything kind of goes by itself. This is my contact information. If you don't have it, I'll just leave that slide up for a minute. Barry at appliedvedicastrology.com. I have office managers that can take phone calls for me at that number. I do a lot of Skype calling at Barry Fort. I'm on Facebook. Many of you know me from Facebook at either Barry Rosen, Astro Yoga, or Spiritual Astrology. If not, you can friend those sites. And I also have a Facebook site, Vedic Astrology Classes by Barry Rosen. And all of them get the same kind of daily posts, which many of you enjoy, but if you're not on those, you may want to like them. I do seem to respond to texts done on Facebook when people need me in a hurry if you have any questions. So we're going to start with some traditional Vedic chanting. Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganeshaya Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha, Om Ganapatiye Namaha. Vakritunda Mahakaya, Surya Koti Samabraha, Nirvigyam Kurame Deva, Sarvakarishu Sarvada. Dhanamulam Guru Murti, Pujamulam Guru Padam, Mantramulam Guru Vakyam, Mokshamulam Guru Vakripa. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Deva, Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Param Brahma, Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Sahana Vavatu, Sahano Bhunaktu, Sahaviryam Karvavahai, Tejasvina Vaditamastu, Ma Vivishavahai, Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Aditaye Samaye Mangale Buddhaye Cha, Guru Shukra Shani Bischa, Rahuve Ketave Namaha. So honoring the great teachers, Lord Krishna, Saraswati, Goddess of Wisdom, Vedavyasa, writer and cognizer of the Vedas, and the holy tradition of masters going back to Brahmananda Saraswati. Honoring my Jyotish teachers that have had the most influence on me, Sanjay Rath, Camilla Sutton, and Bill Levacy. We have people signed up here. So today's kind of our overview class, which is kind of an ocean in a drop. The class will kind of start in 2 weeks on March 25th. I have all kinds of different people kind of taking these classes. So for people who don't know anything about Nakshatras, we do kind of go in, you will be taken care of. And for those of you who know something about Nakshatras, we do have kind of advanced predictive techniques later in the day. A lot of my work is kind of oriented towards psychology and spirituality. So half of the course is about helping us understand the nature of the mind and how the Nakshatras influence the mind. The Nakshatras have the most impact on our mental energies, and so helping to kind of recognize what's going on helps us to kind of understand and better catch it. For those of you who've read my books and my articles, I often talk about that one of the purposes of astrology is to shine light on the craziness of the mind, and usually the planets are kind of pulling our emotions and our mental activities And if we kind of know what's going on, we shine light on these hidden, then we can kind of cut the puppet strings of the puppeteer, and we can be free. So Jyotish should lead us to enlightenment. It should free us from our crazy mind, and certainly all my classes are oriented toward getting a perspective on that. Many people are interested in prediction, which is, we're going to do half a class on prediction. There are a lot of exciting predictive techniques in the class, and I've written some articles on them. One is called Navatara. We'll go over that a little bit today, so you have an overview of it. And then there's some other techniques that we're going to look at. Each of the nakshatras has some shakti that it gives out from certain devas, and there's techniques where you can trace the personality in the connections between the nakshatras. And nakshatras, like the planet, the signs are connected to different elements, and you can learn a lot about your nature by understanding the elements. And then the nakshatras are intimately connected to the dashas and the transits, and so we'll be spending some time on that and give you some advanced techniques on that. And there are connections between nakshatras and the daily panchanga, which is in the lunar days. And then there's some advanced techniques that we'll do with what's called Sarvabhata chakra, and I'll show you a picture of that. It's quite fascinating. Stars aspect each other from across the sky, so it's quite fascinating. For those of you, this is my shameless plug, who haven't bought my book yet, it is available on Amazon, Vedic Astrological Almanac for 2018-2019. It's over 300 pages. 60 pages are just kind of general astrology articles on understanding transits and dashas and the nature of astrology. Then there's political and economic forecasts in there. There's also transits for the larger planets this year, Saturn and Rahu and Jupiter and Ketu, and also all the other planets too. So, and it's very detailed. It's not just charts. So that can be picked up on Amazon here. For those of you who like to attend Vedic astrology conferences, London this year, which is the best conference of the year, the British Association of Vedic Astrology has a whole week on dashas. Sanjay Routh will be giving a lot of material. I will be speaking at the United Astrology Conference in Chicago on May 25th to 31st. Usually there's about 1,800 people that show up for that conference. It's absolutely huge. It's both a Western conference with a Vedic track. So those of you who are near Chicago who like astrology can think about that one. And I will be speaking again in Sedona this year at the Sedona Vedic Astrology Conference. Let me tell you a little bit about the course format for those of you who are in the class or taking the class. One is, today I'm going to kind of hold questions for pauses. I don't usually get through my material if I take a lot of questions. So if you have a question, write it down. We'll have a chance for questions later. If you take my classes, I do send the PowerPoints out ahead of time so you can read through them, and that becomes the first read. And then when I go over it, we can go in more detail, and obviously bringing in more examples and more case studies to make the points real is what we need to do. And we do practice on your charts. If you'd like us to do that, if you send us your birth data, we will practice examples through your chart so that you'll more intimately get to know yourself. Homework is always helpful. Like in any course, you get out as much as you put in. Some people, just show up for the lectures and they're too busy to kind of work on the material. And sometimes people have times. I have one student who's a full-time mother, and her kids go to school, and so during the day she studies her astrology, and she always kind of gets a lot out of the course. I'm getting a call from my office, which I can't take. I'm going to let them know that I'm not available. Just a second, real quickly. Hold on. Basically, we also always want to kind of avoid Jyotish overload, and so I have to kind of try to balance theoretical information with practical application in every class, and that's something that we'll do. Ideally, these courses kind of need maybe 21-hour classes, but people don't really want to do something over 5 months. So this class goes, about 3 months with some breaks. Um, anyway, I'm getting a text from my office. Okay, but anyway, one of the things that that we need to do with these classes, the nakshatras are kind of a new language, and for those of you who got our free gift, which was some charts of all the nakshatras and their meanings and the deities that are connected with them, if you print that out on a 12 by 18 piece of cardboard and study it, you'll start kind of absorbing this new language. One of the things I tell people, when I used to teach basic astrology, I would have people make flashcards and say, if you don't memorize the basic material, then you have difficulty the rest of the class. So what that means is, I used to tell people, well, you have to know that Mars owns Aries and Scorpio, it's exalted in Capricorn, it's debilitated in Cancer, and it's friends with Jupiter and stuff like that. So with the nakshatras, you have to kind of know, Ashwini is 0 to 13 to 20 degrees. It's ruled by Ketu. The deity is connected to Shiva, and the more you kind of put that on flashcards and start getting to know that, the easier the material becomes for you. I do have other classes available if you decide not to take the nakshatra classes. I tend to specialize in what I call boutique classes. I don't teach basic astrology very much, although there will be some classes this year. But I do teach kind of specialized classes. So I have recorded classes available on transits, on dashas, on finding your soul's purpose, on the emotional, psychological, and spiritual basis of astrology. I taught a course on personal finance, money, karma, and astrology. Just finished a 17-lesson course on secrets of the houses and a 7-lesson course on relationships. So if you have a very specialized needs and you don't need a live class, you can just watch my tapes at any time. And those are on my website at appliedvedicastrology.com under the webinar chat. So let's get to today's material. What I need to do is I have to answer a quick email, quick text from my office about some emergency, and then I'm going to start. So let me put up the next slide for you, and we'll start in just a second. Okay, so what we're going to do today is this course is like the ocean in a drop. So all 11 weeks of the course are somewhat contained in this class. So the things that we hope to cover over the next 10 to 11 lessons, we're going to kind of maybe touch on some of them for 5 or 10 minutes today to give you kind of an overview of what you might learn in this class. But each one of these 5 or 10 minute presentations will end up being a 1 to 4 hour lesson later on. So this is a lot of overview material. I won't actually do, this is the only class where I won't bring in a lot of examples, just maybe a couple, because the purpose of this class is to give you an overview of what nakshatras, what we can do with nakshatras for understanding psychology and for understanding prediction. So nakshatra means, it comes from 2 words. Naksha in Sanskrit means getting closer, and tra means to preserve. So the 2 words together means one that never decays. And that's, the Western astrologers call these kind of fixed stars because the stars are kind of undying, although we do see meteor showers and you see stars that do die. So nothing is eternal even in that level of matter. But the fixed stars, are millions of years old. And we know a lot of these stars from Western astrology and from astronomy classes. Antares is in Scorpio. Orion is the constellation that straddles between Taurus and Gemini, and in the Vedic system is called Mrigashirsa. I'm going to give you all the English names in this presentation just for fun. I think when we're working with clients and talking to people, people can relate to Orion and Arcturus and Betelgeuse, and those are basically the English names for a lot of these Sanskrit constellations, and that's what we're talking about. And all these constellations have personalities, and in the same way that we grew up understanding what an Aries is and what a Taurus is, well, there's three types of Aries. There's an Ashwini Aries, there's a Bharani Aries, and there's a Kritika Aries. And so they give us more microscopic information about the signs and the personality. So nakshatras influence the mind, and that's because the moon transits through one constellation of the zodiac daily, and hence they impact our daily struggles for peace and calmness. So one of my spiritual teachers is fond of saying, just wait 2.5 days. If you're feeling this way, it'll shift because the moon takes 2.5 days to go through a sign. In the same way, every 12 hours, the moon goes through a constellation and creates and integrates different energies. And what happens is, due to the complex mental matrix that we're born with, from the connections of the stars, we also interact with the transits that are happening daily, and this creates the ups and downs of our emotions, of our mind, of the chaos and the sorrow that moves through us. And the more we understand these interactions, then the more we have insights into what's going on. And sometimes these transits are long, like Saturn may spend 3 or 4 months in a nakshatra. Actually, Saturn spends often like 11 months in a nakshatra. And so if it goes into a nakshatra that's difficult, like it was just in a nakshatra in Sagittarius called Mula, which is connected to Niriti, which is the goddess of destruction, it tends to create a lot of calamities and such. And so understanding these influences and knowing when they're going to end is kind of useful when we're studying transits. But also, if that influence is in your natal chart, then you're born with that kind of energy, and it's influencing you all the time. So obviously, the interaction between in the nakshatras kind of propels us through our evolution in life, and it creates and unfolds our karma, and ultimately understanding the nature of the nakshatras and the secrets of the nakshatras helps us unfold our destiny, because there are very specific advanced information kind of hidden in the nakshatras. To me, I always use the analogy of Vedic astrology. When you get into it, is like reading strands of DNA. It's that specific. Every degree means something. So the nakshatras are 13 degrees. Every nakshatra is divided into 4 sections, and every section means something. And then there are even one degree section. So it's like reading strands of DNA. And the divine creator created this, in Vedic astrology, created this ability for us to read DNA strands. And it helps us understand our nature, our karma, and how our karma is going to unfold. Nakshatras, this is basic stuff for some people. I have some people I know who don't know anything. Nakshatras have 4 sections in them that are 3 minutes and 20 degrees. So each nakshatra is 13 minutes and 20 degrees. And there are 4 sections in each nakshatra. And each section is connected to the 4 major aims of life. Kama, or pleasure, you all know the Kama Sutras. Moksha, which is the quest for liberation and to be free. Artha, the quest for wealth and status. And Dharma, the quest to protect and defend and advance society. So each nakshatra is connected to these kind of 4 basic fields of life. And when we learn to diagnose and explain these, we get more specific information. So if your Mercury is in the Kama section of the nakshatra, then it gives it more of a kind of a drive for pleasure. If it's in the moksha section, then it gives it more quest for liberation. So part of what we want to learn is how to kind of read these strands of DNA, so we can be more specific in understanding ourselves and helping our clients. these four aims of life, they're called the Purusharthas, um, sometimes get misunderstood. Kama, sometimes, everybody thinks of the Kama Sutras, which is about sexual pleasure. But Kama is just about dealing with pleasure and enjoyment. It's the divine play of the Lord. Even going to an art museum, is kind of a pleasurable thing. I mean, our world, for the most part, is very kind of pleasure-oriented. Um, um, and when we watch TV, that's the primary message that comes through here. Life is about great sex, it's about great food and stuff like that. And that's a legitimate aim of life, and it's not to negate it. Moksha does not just cover enlightenment, but also education, knowledge, teaching, reading, and writing. It's connected to the water signs. And moksha also is about kind of letting go. I mean, you can look at people who aren't on the spiritual path, and if their connections in their chart connected to moksha elements, it may be that they get involved in drugs or alcohol as a way of kind of letting go of life, because they seek to kind of transcend, and they may not find a spiritual path yet, but they have this deep longing to kind of transcend, and in a sense. And a lot of people, as you know, came to meditation after taking drugs and kind of overdosing, and still realizing they had that deeper quest to kind of transcend it all. Dharma, is connected to the fire signs and to the fire padas, and it's connected with altruism, ethics, and righteousness. I mean, we think of our policemen and our warriors and our defenders of society, and even our politicians being very connected to kind of action to create a better society and to defend society. And Artha, which is the fourth Purushartha, does not only mean wealth, it's connected to power, influence, fame, reputation, position. It's connected to the earth signs, and it seems to be a very driving force in the material world. So one of the things that we're going to do in the class is kind of learn how to read and interpret these microscopic levels of planets in particular padas, and what it means for giving more information about a chart. So those of you who are going to be taking our class, again, I encourage you to kind of memorize our new language. And again, making flashcards. I mean, some of you may commute on public transportation, and instead of reading a book, you could take your flashcards with and study, what Rohini means and who the Lord is and who the Devas are connected with Rohini. So I sent you that placard. You can print it. But you just might want to make flashcards, and on the flashcards, this is something. We're not meeting next week to give people a little chance. This is something you should do over the next couple of weeks if you're taking the class, is to start kind of learning the ABCs of Nakshatras. And if you do, then the rest of the class you don't have to kind of keep looking it up in a book. And I always provide copious PowerPoint information so you can print and read also. But it's flashcards are a nice way to kind of learn this material. There's a numerology connected with the Nakshatras that you want to kind of get familiar with. And so the K2 Nakshatras are 1, 10, and 19. You add 9 to the sequence of numbers in Nakshatras to get the rest of the sequence. And so the first nakshatra of the zodiac is called Ashvini. It's from 0, 13, 20 in Aries, and it's ruled by Ketu. And so, 9 nakshatras away is another Ketu nakshatra, which is called Magha, which is at the first 13 and 20 minute degrees of Leo. And then the third nakshatra connected to Ketu is 9 nakshatras away, which is 5 signs away in the first part of Sagittarius, called Mula. And so it's good to kind of memorize the numerological sequence, because there's a whole numerology for predicting with nakshatras that we'll learn, and understanding the numbers is helpful. You kind of want to know the locations of the nakshatras, because it's useful to look at a chart and just know that exactly that Mars, if it's at 29 degrees Taurus, is going to be in the constellation of Mrigashirsa, which is called Orion. And so like the Mars nakshatras overlap two signs, the last 6 degrees of Taurus, the first 6 degrees of Gemini, the last 6 degrees of Virgo, the first 6 degrees of Libra, and the last 6 degrees. So it's good to kind of know where things are in the sky, because when you look at it, you know, the computer will tell us where those are, but it's kind of nice to quickly look at a chart and just say, oh my God, he's got 3 planets in Ashwini, you know, and that, you know, that kind of cues you into something. So catch up, you know, stay on top of the sequencing, the numerology. There are also guna types that are connected with the nakshatras. These are easy to remember because the first 9 nakshatras are connected to Rajas, the second 9 are connected to Tamas, and the third are connected to Sattva. And so we'll go over that in a minute. And then there are deities connected to the nakshatras. We'll have a whole lesson on this because the deity kind of has a rich mythology connected to it. And my goal is to kind of translate the mythology into modern psychology, because we want to be able to you know, help people understand what's going on with a key transit or a key mythological, psychological lesson that's going on in their chart. So that we have a whole lesson on that, and I think it's quite fascinating. It's some new material I'm putting together. The Shakti of the nakshatras is that the planets going through there kind of exude a certain power. Shakti is obviously kind of a gifted energy, and each one of the nakshatras has some energy that it kind of exudes, and we want to kind of get to understand those. And then we're going to understand what's called the Gandanta point, and that's the area between the fire and the water and the fire signs, which is at the end of Pisces, the end of Cancer, and the end of Scorpio. And there's a whole kind of rich understanding of what happens when planets go through there if you were born in that area. And then we talked about the padas and the sequencing already a little bit. So we're kind of into kind of microscopic analysis. To me, you know, we started out learning planets and signs and planets and houses. Now we have to learn planets and nakshatras, planets in a section of a nakshatra, planet in a certain degree of the nakshatra, and that gives us additional meaning to give very specific kind of DNA information about what our life is about. So here's a quick. I don't like to go over cookbooks in class. I kind of write these out, and you know, they're available on my PowerPoints. But here's a list of all the nakshatras and their Shakti. So Ashwini is the first nakshatra at 0 degrees Aries, and it's connected. It's the key word for it is, remember, it's the quick starter. The Aries are known for being, you know, just quick and getting things done quickly. And Ashwini has all this kind of creative power. Ashwini is a very kind of creative nakshatra, and Ashwini is connected like with the creative power that is the beginning of the Big Bang that creates the whole universe, which unfolds in one kind of moment. But it has this incredible power to create. And Ashwini is a very kind of healing nakshatra, and it's about reaching one's goals. Bharani, connected to Venus, has the power to clean impurities. So it's very kind of connected to kind of healing. It's also connected with the word Yama, connected to death. And death is one of those words that doesn't work well in Vedic astrology. I think the word transformation is the better word to use. And so Bharani is really kind of into, they often create artists. I have friends who are Bharani Nakshatra, and they're painters, and they're great artists because there's the Venus Mars energy, the energy to create great art. So I'm not going to go through all of these. We need to kind of you know, spend time learning them, and weeks 2 and 3 we're going to go in great detail about all of these nakshatras. And between now and then, you can, you know, there are books that you can read, and in the flashcards, you have to start kind of learning the language of the nakshatras. It's quite fascinating. So there are English names to the nakshatras, and this is something that fascinates me because I'm always trying to translate these abstract Sanskrit terms into English, because I find that half our battle in learning Vedic astrology is that when we study, when we pick up a book from India, and we get all these Sanskrit terms, bhava and you know, raha, drishti, and all these things, you know, our brain immediately turns off. So one of the things I do in all my classes is I try to translate Sanskrit into English right away so that we can at least kind of speak the language and understand it. So here's a list of all the English names for the constellations. And you know, some of them are easy to remember. The Pleiades, which everybody loves, you know, the seven sisters in the skies, is Kritika. Mrigashira, which is my favorite constellation, is, you know, between Gemini and Taurus, is Orion. You see him in the winter sky. Castor and Pollux, everybody know, the twins of Gemini. Um, um, uh, Maga, which is connected to Regulus, which is connected to kings, and our president Donald Trump, he's a Leo rising, and his rising constellation is Maga, which is Regulus, and so Maga creates great leaders, and so it's no accident that he was born and he had that desire for leadership. Um, um, some of the other English names, Arcturus, everybody kind of, I always remember Arcturus, I don't know, is Swati, it's in Libra. Why I always remember Arcturus. Arcturus is a very kind of material constellation. And we can always remember that these constellations, you know, we can link them back to their signs. And we know Libra is actually a material constellation of pleasure and merchants and business. And so Swati, one of the constellations there, is, you know, the main one is very kind of connected to growth of material. But all of these constellations have very deep meaning. I mean, if you pick up Prash Trivedi's book, which is the book that I've recommended to you, I mean, he's got 300 pages on the Nakshatras. And, you know, it's worth maybe reading a chapter every night. I think, you know, for those of you who are taking the class, I would spend one night before you go to bed just reading about a Nakshatra, either from Camille Sutton's book on the Nakshatras, Dennis Harness's book on the Nakshatras, or Prash Trivedi's book, which is the best one on the Nakshatras, because, you know, they're kind of fascinating, and I think the more we become familiar with their meanings, the more we can help learn how to use them when we interpret charts. So those are the English names. I'm missing Shadabishak for some reason. I did have it in the original slideshow. The Shadabishak is connected to Rahu, and it's connected to the 100 positions, so 100 little bright stars in the zodiac. So those of you who like astrology and astronomy, rather, the nakshatras are all about really astronomy. It's about these fixed stars that were the original astrology before the signs came, before the houses came. You know, there were just the fixed stars. Now there are Sanskrit names for the nakshatras, and you know, if you know Sanskrit, the power of Sanskrit is that the name equals the form. So if we get the Sanskrit pronunciation right, we're kind of more tapping into the real energy of this. You know, so I mean, those of you know Shani is Saturn, and Shukra is Venus, and things like that. And it's good to know the Sanskrit names, because you know, some of my teachers only want to use the Sanskrit names because of the power of Sanskrit. For the most part, we will use the Sanskrit names for the nakshatras. One of my students, last time I taught nakshatras, you know, she made sure that I got my Sanskrit pronunciations right. And so here's my Sanskrit guide to pronouncing these. I've kind of tried to transliterate them, and you know, for a long time I've just mispronounced them terribly. I mean, I used to call Bharani Baharani, you know, because that's what it looks like when you spell it, but it's Bharani, you know. So you've got a kind of Ashvini, the W is a V. Kritika has an R. Rohini is easy. Mrigashirsa actually has a I used to always call it Mrigashira, but there's an S in it. Mrigashirsa. Ardra, Purnavasu, Pusha, Ashlesha. There's a long A in there. Ashlesha, Maga. It's more like Maga. I always want to call it Maga, you know, because it's kind of like an English thing, but it's Maga. And then Purva Flaguni, Purva, Uttara Falguni, Hasta, Chitra, Swati, it's got a long A in it. Vishaka, it's got a short A in it. Anurada, got long A's in it. Anurada. Jeshta, it's got that, it's that E is like a double A. Jeshta. Mula is like woo, Mula, cow Mula. Purva, Shada, Uttara Shada, Abhijit, which is the mystery constellation. We'll talk about it next week. Shravana, Dhanishta, Shatabisha. There's no K. It's spelled with a K, but the K is silent. Shatabisha. Purva Bhadrapada, which is a mouthful, is the weirdest constellation in the zodiac. Uttara Bhadrapada, those are all in Pisces, and Revati, which is the most spiritual constellation in the sky. So, you know, you can look at the Sanskrit guide. It's good to get the Sanskrit right. You're going to tap into the energy of the nakshatras, and like I've taught my students before, if you know, the planets start talking to you when you get to know them, and knowing the Sanskrit means that you'll get to know the planets better, the nakshatras better. This is some work we'll do later in the class. Some of this is still kind of work in progress. At the end of my Secrets of the House classes, I talked about how moving through the signs of the zodiac was the process of personal growth and individuation. And the nakshatras are connected in this way also. And Ashwini represents the first kind of creative impulse of life. And in the Vedas, you know, the first word of the Rig Veda is Agni Mile, Ah. Ah is that sound of creation. It's the sound of creation forming and creating the whole universe. I think one of my gurus explained that, you know, scientists have it all wrong. At some point, the universe just created, and it was complete, and everything manifested at once. You know, the birds and the trees and the rocks and the mountains, everything was just created at once. It wasn't like the scientists think it was. It just kind of manifested out of this kind of a creative impulse. You know, this you know, God breathing into the universe, and this whole universe gets created. And that's the power of Ashvini. Bharani, forming identity. Aries is about you know, our sense of ego, making our, you know, Aries kind of wants to kind of compete. It wants to show that it's better than other people. It's when our ego starts developing in Aries. And Bharani is part of that section of it where we're kind of starting to form who we are, and that's what happens in Aries. Kritika, creating sense of ethics and justice. Rohini Rohini is a beautiful constellation because it's connected with Krishna, and it's connected with it's where the moon gets exalted. Well, actually, the moon gets exalted in Kritika, but Rohini is this wonderful place in the sky ruled by the moon. And it's all, and Venus, you know, and Taurus has that kind of politeness and etiquette energy connected to it, and very sweet nakshatra. It also can be very dangerous if Saturn goes through there. Mrigashirsa, again, about spiritual questing. That's connected with Orion, the warrior. Mrigashirsa has this incredible questing energy. I find a lot of spiritual people have key planets in Mrigashirsa. Ardra is a kind of is the teardrop constellation connected with Rahu. Sense of conquest and dominance. It tends to create shed tears. Purnavasu is where I have my Jupiter. It's about seeing pattern in the universe and forming and seeing the hidden matrix of things. Purnavasu is the hidden universal mother who likes to nurture and heal. Pusha, the most auspicious constellation of the zodiac, is about stability and practice. Ashlesha, at the end of Cancer, moving toward something higher, is probably the positive way of looking at it. Usually that's a pretty difficult constellation. Moga, need for social life. So the first 10 nakshatras are about the process of individuation. The second 10 nakshatras are more connected to moving into society. So Maga awakens the need for social life. The other constellations start advancing social life and then moving into society, creating architecture and Tritra. Swati, learning conformity and flexibility. moving into globalization by the time we get into Jeshta. So there's a whole sequencing that's going on there. We'll spend some time going into more detail on this. Again, this is my 5-minute overview. And then Nakshatras 19 through 27, which started in Sagittarius, they're called the spiritual constellations. They're the Sattvic constellations, and they awaken the need for spirituality. So Mula, which is the first part of Sagittarius, where Saturn is creating this kind of need for spiritual awakening in transit now. And then as we move into the other constellations, spiritual knowledge, practical spiritual knowledge, and Revati, which is the final constellation of the zodiac, is the most sattvic of all the constellations in the whole zodiac. And when you meet people with a lot of Revati influences, you know, they're deeply philosophical, interested in enlightenment, and there's a deep need for love and unity. So in that Pisces sense of love and unity. I'm going to pause for a second to rest my voice. I am going to, if you have a quick questions, I'm going to see if I can go to webinar. I think you can just kind of press, and if you have a question, I think you can hit the question thing in chat, and I think I can unmute you and take questions on the mic. One of the things that you'll learn about me is I'm a little bit encyclopedic, and I do pour out a lot of material. So what happens is, one, you get the slideshows, so you can go over them. Two, you can listen to the videotapes again because you get the videotapes a second time. And three, we will go slower. Today is kind of like, you know, giving you an overview of 10 or 11 weeks of material. And so I'm kind of like dashing through things, but, you know, we actually have to spend time on everything in great detail, which we'll do. Okay. So there's a connection between nakshatras and timing. And we'll have a whole lesson on this, or maybe 3 lessons on this. So first of all, nakshatras are, the nakshatra that you're born in determines the dasha that starts your life. And so that energy becomes a kind of deep imprint of the nature of your existence, actually, because that the imprint of that starting nakshatra where your moon is creates an important influence on your life. And then your dashas actually unfold in a sequence from the first dasha that you're born with. So, for example, I was born in Jeshta in Scorpio. So my Ketu period was connected to Mula, which is in Sagittarius. My Venus period was connected to Purva Shada, which is in Sagittarius. My Sun period was connected to Uttara Shada, and my Moon period is connected to Shravana. So the sequence of your dashas is connected to the 9 nakshatras that unfold in order from your birth star. And so a Ketu period connected to Magha, to Mula, which is the one that I went through, is not the same if I was born into Revati and my Ketu period was connected to Ashvini. So we'll learn a little bit about how your dashas are connected to the unfoldment of where your starting point is, and the interpretation of the dashas is more detailed when you look at the chart from the actual nakshatra that you're born in. So that's kind of some advanced knowledge that we'll give you. But a lot of people, the star that you're born with is called your Jamna Nakshatra. That's called your birth moon. And in India, that's what everybody is fixated on. And that's the number 1. So there's a sequence of 9 that happens, and the stars connected to your birth star are the ones that your birth moon are the most important. Now, this whole sequence of timing can also be applied to your ascendant and to your dasha lord, and we'll go over that when we study this for 2 weeks later in the class. But so there are these kind of Sanskrit names that go with each of these numbers. So the first star that you're born in your birth moon is called Jamna. The second one is called Sampat. connected to gains. The third one is called VPOT, dangers to finance, and et cetera, et cetera. And what we're going to do is learn some advanced knowledge about this in the class later. Andrew Floss has a wonderful article on this, absolutely brilliant, where he connects the Navatara, the sequence of 9, to the dasha sequencing, and so there's a connection. So Sampat, which is connected to gains, is connected to the planet Venus, which often does bring kind of material gains. Number 5, which is Prayatek, is connected to Mars, and Mars brings kind of challenges, and it's because Mars is kind of a fierce enemy that is kind of approach you. So we can kind of understand these a little bit more deeply, and we'll go into more detail about this. But the numbers are very specific, and we learn a lot about timing and our dashas and our transits from these rules. I mean, one of the things that, if you've read my article on Sadi Sad, everybody knows Sadi Sad, but Sadi Sad is really difficult because of when does Sadi Sad really start? It doesn't just start when the moon goes into your 12th house. It goes into when the moon goes into your 25th nakshatra. So and all the transits of Sadi Sad are not bad. So you can time the good Sadi Sad periods from the bad Sadi Sad periods by understanding the numerical relationships. It's kind of complicated, but we'll go through some examples of that. Again, this is all like overview material. There are deities connected to each of the planetary nakshatras, and we'll spend a week learning all the deities and the mythology. So Pusha which is in Cancer, is the most auspicious constellation of the zodiac, and it's lorded by Saturn. I mean, we wouldn't think that the most auspicious constellation of the zodiac would be lorded by Saturn, but it's because the deity of Pusha is Brihaspati, which is really Jupiter. So it's the guru, and that's why when you have planets in Pusha, it's getting the blessings of the guru. So understanding the mythology of each nakshatra helps us understand the rich tapestry of what kind of Shakti is given and how these deities are kind of functioning in our psychology. And I'm developing a lot of new material on this because there isn't that much written about it. And I'm always trying to translate these Vedic things into modern psychology and into English that people can understand. So we have a whole lesson on that later on. And then for those of you who know Muhurta, which is electional astrology, there are kind of groupings of nakshatras for starting your day, for doing things, for electing things. So these are categories like fixed nakshatras, fixed sign of Taurus. You've got Rohini, Uttarashada, which is in Sagittarius, Capricorn, and Uttarabhada, Pada, which is in Pisces. I'm sorry, half of Pisces and half of Aquarius. Each of these nakshatras has a certain quality to them. So there's soft nakshatras, like Chitra, which is and Anuradha and Mrigashirsa, and Revati, which are connected to starting a fine arts class or conceiving a child. There's soft nakshatras. And there are light nakshatras for starting a business or beginning travel, like Ashvini or Ashpusha or Hasta. And there's sharp nakshatras, which are the ones that are the difficult ones, Mula, Jeshta, Ardra, and Ashlesha, which are sometimes used to, if you want to start a war, you start it in one of these nakshatras. That's what the Vedic texts say, or they're used for black magic and creating curses. And we wouldn't ever want to use them that way in modern times, but they have a kind of a fiercer quality to them. And then the movable nakshatras, Shravana, Janishta, Sadabisha, Vasu, buying a car, gardening, going on a parade, things like that. So we're not going to spend much time on Muhurta in the class. I just wanted you to understand that traditionally the nakshatras have been used for, they're so important because the qualities and the deities connected to them allow us to create auspicious events in our life. And so understanding the daily transits through them also gives you kind of an understanding of them. Um, so one of the things that we're going to do also is look at the padas. So there's 108 padas in the zodiac. You all know the magical 108. And then there are different strengths in the padas. Sometimes you probably all know about Virgodama when the planet is in this pada, same sign, same Navamsha. And so there in the sections of the nakshatras, there's kind of sometimes hidden power. Pushkara is, there's certain places in the sky that have incredible creative energy. And if you're born with Pushkara nakshatras, it just gives you extra shakti to kind of create things. The padas can be, their own sign, debilitated, exalted. So we're going to be looking at the padas, how to interpret them in people's charts, connecting them to the Purushartas, the earth, water, fire, and air signs, and how that kind of microscopically happens. Now, Prashravedi, a lot of the stuff is encyclopedic, and I can't remember every pada. And so you have to kind of pull out Camilla Sutton's book on nakshatras, which is a good reference book, the Prashravedi's book on nakshatras, to kind of get into that. I particularly like Camilla Sutton's book for giving these microscopic readings. But I certainly am not going to teach you the meaning of every pada. We'll try to go with general principles, and then you have to learn how to use these reference books. We went through this already, the nakshatras and the padas. So again, I'll take another pause here. Again, I'm going at light speed here. Does anybody have any question? I think I'm happy to unmute you. For some reason, I don't understand how to unmute everybody on GoToMeeting. There's a place where you can raise your hand on the dashboard, and then it shows up on my panel, and then I can unmute you if you have a question. Again, I apologize. This is my lightning speed lecture. We will go more slowly in class, but I'm trying to kind of give you the ocean of 10 or 11 lessons of this class in 2 hours here, so you just understand everything that we can do with nakshatras. So what is the real meaning of nakshatras? Is that this is really, I spend a lot of time on this. The Rashis manage the material world, and the nakshatras govern the mental world. And this is really an important statement. In part of the, for those of you who know advanced dasha work, there are things called Rashi dashas, like Chara dasha. And I'm doing an advanced Germany class with Mark Boney, and if you really want to predict when somebody's going to buy a house or get a raise at work, or if when they're going to get married, you can see this really easily in the Rashi dashas, which are connected to the material world. And it's Mark uses the phrase elegantly simple. Sometime we'll teach a class on that, but when you're really kind of trying to time events in people's lives, you can see it very, very clearly in things like Chara dasha, the Rashi dashas, so they govern the material world. And people don't really know about them enough. Everybody learns Vimshotri dasha, which is connected to the moon. And the Vimshotri dasha is, because it's connected to the moon and the nakshatras, it's more about how we feel about something, what mentally happens in our mind during those dashas. So if we're running, I'll give you for example, I'm currently in a Rahu period. And Rahu is in Mula Nakshatra in my chart. I'll pull up my chart just to give you, those of you who know who I am. So here I am, Scorpio rising. Scorpio rising, and I'm actually ruled by Ketu. And I've got Ketu and Jupiter in the 8th, and I have a stationary Jupiter, and that's my claim to fame. That's my Jyotish kind of just rolls out of my tongue, and I've been very probably blessed from past lives to kind of just have known this stuff. But I'm currently in a Rahu period, and Rahu is in Mula Nakshatra. If you look up at the Nakshatra table here, you'll see that Rahu is in Mula Nakshatra, and the Lord is Ketu. And so if you didn't know a lot of Jyotish, you would say, oh, Rahu is this, and this. But the real nature of this period that's going on for me is connected to Ketu and to Mula Nakshatra. And so it's been a very spiritual period. And what's Ketu doing in my chart? Ketu is in the 8th house with Jupiter, and suddenly I've been involved in Jyotish for 30 years. I've specialized in financial astrology and in business astrology. But suddenly, when I went into my Rahu period, I started going much deeper into spiritual astrology and Jaimini astrology, and I've been teaching classes now. And it's all connected to Ketu, and Ketu's bringing out this Ketu in the 8th, with Jupiter. Teaching astrology, teaching spiritual knowledge. And the Ketu period hasn't, Ketu, as you know, is not an easy energy sometimes. It kind of takes away things. And a lot of things in my life have changed dramatically since I went to my Rahu period. And the hidden meaning of my Rahu period is really because Rahu is in Ketu's Nakshatra. And if you don't learn to kind of read and understand that, then you're going to miss some details of Nakshatra Dasha. So that's, I just wanted to share that with you. So basically, we have to kind of learn to blend the material world of the Rashi signs with the mental energy of the Nakshatras. And sometimes how we feel about something is all that matters. I mean, I have a friend, and she had, she went from her Jupiter period into her Saturn period, and Saturn was in a difficult nakshatra. And she was, she suddenly, had been this cheery person and this Jupiter person, and then she suddenly got really depressed, and she said, and she said, oh, nobody's going to hire me, nobody, I'm no good, so all this kind of difficult mental energy came up in her life. And she stopped, she got so depressed, she stopped looking for a job. And, Saturn was her Atmakarka planet for Taurus. And literally somebody knocked on the door and offered her this big job at this big company. And then she became very kind of wealthy at this company. But her mental energy was such that it was so kind of intense from the Nakshatra transit that she was, immobile. So if we understand how the Nakshatras are influencing us, then we can really get a handle on our mental energy, because half the battle is battling our mind, and if we understand how the Nakshatras are influencing our mind, then we can cut the puppet strings. I mean, it actually took, I know a lot of Jyotish, and I think it took about 6 years into my Rahu period that I really started understanding that, God, but this whole period is Ketu. I knew that rule, but it wasn't, I was so kind of enmeshed in this Ketu energy ruling my life and making, and I went through surgery, and there's all these huge changes that I went through that Ketu can kind of bring. And it wasn't until, I did some healing around my Ketu, and then I'm finally kind of moving forward in my life. But it was almost like for 5 or 6 years, I didn't have the insight even to kind of be on top of my Ketu, because these mental energies kind of are very hidden, and they kind of govern our life in a very kind of hidden way sometimes, and we can't always see them, and that's what we have to learn to do to help ourselves and to help our clients. So what happens is nakshatras kind of channel energy. So I gave the example of, actually I want to use this other slide first. Well, so what happens with nakshatras is that they kind of channel energy. So if you're, I'll just look at my chart again because I know it and I can just do it very quickly. My sun is in Pisces, and is also in Purva Bhadrapada, which is also ruled by Jupiter. So basically, my sun is my strongest planet. It's in my 5th house, Lord the 10th and the 5th. Makes me very creative at work. But it has a lot of optimism connected to it, because not only is it in Pisces, Jupiter's sign, it's in Jupiter's nakshatra. So it brings in a lot of kind of optimism for my stationary Jupiter. So it's kind of channeling, my sun is channeling Jupiter. So when I went into my sun period, you know, I've been in a very difficult Venus period that was very emotionally debilitating. When I went into my sun period, it wasn't just that the sun picked things up. It was there's a lot of optimism, confidence that developed. And I started a new business in that period, and because the mental energy was very strong. But if my sun were in Purva Bhadrash, if I was born 15 days later, and it would be in a different constellation, the lord of the constellation would be Saturn, and I would be channeling, my sun period would have been more Saturn in nature, and it would have been channeling more the depressive aspect of my Saturn in the 12th house. So when you start doing an analysis of people's charts, you want to look at what nakshatra it's in, because it's channeling that energy. And so the material value and the attitude towards something is going to channel that energy. So my attitude toward work, sun is Lord of the 10th and the 5th here, is channeling Jupiter's energy. And actually, my sun period started, and that's in 1987, and that's when I started my my astrological business. And so there's connection between Sun and Jupiter in the 8th and Ketu. I actually started even teaching astrology. I was teaching financial astrology in the early 90s in my sun period. And so the sun was channeling and bringing in the energy from my 8th house, which was Jupiter and Ketu. And you know, before that, I was in a Venus period, and my Venus, I was teaching college literature. I was a librarian. I was an academic. I was a professor at university. And suddenly, I changed careers completely when I went into my sun period. And it was also, there's deeper knowledge available in the nakshatras. So the nakshatras that your planets in reveal a lot of hidden information about your life, and then they're connected to different houses. And so we have to kind of learn how to we have to learn how to interpret that. And that's, for those of you who have any basic knowledge of nakshatras, that's something you do know probably. And then there are these kind of special nakshatras. I mean, one of the new things we'll teach you today is that the 25th nakshatra from the moon shows the workings of the mind. So you take your birth moon, and you count 25 stars. So and there are tables on Sri Jyoti Star that will do this. But so my birth moon is Jeshta, and the 25th star from my birth moon is, you can just count backwards. This is 1, 26, 25. You know, so it turns out Swati, which is the constellation of Arcturus, rules my mind. And so the 25th nakshatra, if you want to study the workings of the mind, obviously you look at the 4th house and the 5th house, but you also look at the 25th nakshatra, and it will, you know, and Swati rules my mind. And Rahu, you know, I've got Rahu in the 2nd house. So Rahu in the 2nd house is, you know, craves money and food, and it's kind of into kind of you know, it has that kind of 2nd house craving. And so my mental energy is very connected to Rahu in the 2nd house because the 25th nakshatra. Now when Saturn goes through the 25th nakshatra, that's when Sadhisat starts. So when Saturn, I mean, you know, a traditional astrologer would say, okay, your Sadhisat is starting because Saturn went into Libra. Well, the first 6 degrees of Libra, you know, wasn't bad. But as soon as Saturn hit Swati nakshatra, then there's this intense wanting to change your whole life energy that comes up in Sadhisat. And the worst part of Sadhisat is the 25th nakshatra, because it happens in the mind, which is the 25th nakshatra. So, and as soon as Saturn goes out of the 25th nakshatra, there's relief from Sadhisat. So really, my Sadhisat was not bad in the 26th nakshatra and the 27th nakshatra. When it hit the 1st nakshatra, obviously, and over the natal moon, it was, you know, very difficult. As soon as it went into the 2nd nakshatra, which is Mula, you know, everything was fine. All kinds of wonderful things happened, even though it was going over Manila Rahu. So the numbers counted from your mind, the 25th nakshatra, kind of reveals something about Sati Sat, and they also reveal something about the nature of your mind. There are other special nakshatras. Let me go over that while I'm thinking about it. Okay, I'm just going to talk about this now just to give you something new. So there are special nakshatras counted from your moon's nakshatra that has certain qualities. So the fourth nakshatra from your moon is called the Jati nakshatra. It tells you something about your caste life, your purpose, what gives you comfort. And like the fourth house, it's connected to comfort. But it's very revealing when you're doing life purpose charts to look at your fourth nakshatra from your moon, and we'll practice that when we do that in the class. The 10th nakshatra is called the karma nakshatra from your moon, connected to kind of what work and career action you'll do. The 7th nakshatra from your moon is kind of the more difficult one, like the 7, which is a Marika planet. It's connected to death and death-like suffering. So it doesn't mean you're going to die, but it may mean you just may feel like you're dying when you have major transits like Saturn or your ascendant lord going through your 7th nakshatra. The 12th nakshatra is called Desa. It's the place where one is fated to fulfill one's birth. So it might tell you if that nakshatra is connected to mountains, you may be connected to spending your life in a mountainous area or something like that. The 19th nakshatra is called Adana. It's connected to spiritual guides and the dharma of gurus, and may be connected to the fortunes of father. And all these can be used in prediction because you get Jupiter or Saturn or Rahu and Ketu spending a lot of time in these special nakshatras. You get these months and year, or maybe up to a year, of certain influences affecting you, and it's very powerful. 16th nakshatra is connected to marriage, of all things. The 18th nakshatra connected to is kind of a really key nakshatra. It's the inheritor of all karma. So sometimes when Saturn or Rahu hit it, just like big karmic influences kind of hit your chart. 22nd nakshatra connected to spiritual realization. 25th nakshatra connected to Mananas is the one we talked about, which is the nature of the mind. If you get Rahu, a very afflicted Rahu, in your natal chart in your 25th nakshatra, and it's maybe connected to Saturn or Gulaka or something, then maybe there's a mental illness in your family. So there's a lot of things that we can see in the nakshatras this way. Okay. So I'm trying to get. So I wanted to give you some of this is kind of we'll spend some time on it. We'll have to practice this section, but again, this is my 5-minute overview of an hour talk. So how do we judge nakshatras? So obviously we're looking at the nakshatra ruler. Where's the ruler of the nakshatra placed? Is it in a good house? Does it have dignity? And this is kind of the hidden thing, is like everything, Bill Levacy has had a very major impact on my astrology. Talks about obviously there's a positive side to a planet and there's kind of a challenging side to a planet. And the nakshatras can also have their positive and challenging sides depending on the ruler is placed. If the ruler of the nakshatra is in a good house, like a trine house, like the 5th or the 9th house, if the ruler has dignity because it's exalted, or it has connected to Jupiter or something, then the nakshatra functions well. So the same rules that we use for houses and house placements and house rulers we can apply to nakshatra and nakshatra rulers, and it gives us more microscopic information. Sometimes if the nakshatra rule is connected to a special yoga, it could bring all kinds of wonderful things. The things that we look at most, which are most useful for doing people's charts, is, and we'll practice this when we get to the section with your charts, is obviously where's the rising sign? What's the rising nakshatra? Where's the rising nakshatra lord? So my chart, we'll go back to my chart because I can do it quickly. So actually, my chart ruler is K2. It's not Mars, and my K2. So my rising sign, my ascendant is at 7 degrees 39 Scorpio. It's in the constellation of Anuradha. So Anuradha kind of has a lot to do with my personality because the Lagna is rotated there. And Anuradha is connected to the deity Mitra. And Mitra means kind of friend. And Mitra is kind of, this is the best Saturn nakshatra. It's a very kind of, Saturn is always, Mitra, Anuradha is into kind of creating groups and bringing things together. And never really understood this until I was studying the nakshatras. But my whole life I'm just kind of pulling people together. I mean, I just put together this remedy class on Jyotish, and I brought together Andrew Foss and Gary Gomes and Panditji, and I created this whole scholarship group around studying Vedic remedies. And it's just something I do. I bring people together into groups, and that's what Anuradha Nakshatra does. And then the ruler of Anuradha is Saturn, and Saturn is in the 12th house, retrograde and exalted in Jupiter's nakshatra of Vishaka. And Vishaka is actually kind of a material nakshatra that wants to move towards spirituality. But it does connect my Saturn and my personality to Jupiter. And when we trace all the relationships in my chart, I've got 3 Jupiter nakshatras. I've got my Sun in Jupiter nakshatra. I've got Saturn in Jupiter nakshatra. I've got Jupiter in its own nakshatra. When you start tracing the relationships back, they kind of go back to Jupiter in the 8th, which is devotion to spiritual knowledge, devotion to connection to Jyotish, discovering hidden things in life, spiritual teachings, teaching of Jyotish. So a lot of you can I call this a nakshatra matrix. You can trace the planets in your chart back to key place, which kind of form a kind of core essence in your chart, and we'll learn how to do that. But when you're looking at the nakshatras in somebody's chart, you're looking at the moon's nakshatra, because that the mind is so connected to the moon, and my moon is in Jyeshtha nakshatra. And Donald Trump also has Jyeshtha nakshatra. Now, Jyeshtha nakshatra is connected to the god Indra, and Indra is kind of the king of the gods, and he has a lot of weaknesses, and in a sense, Indra can have a lot of leadership qualities. So Jyeshtha has a lot of leadership qualities, but they're also kind of prone to kind of problems, because Indra can be a little bit blind in its zeal to kind of be in charge. And so I actually am surprised when I was really kind of studying myself, and I did want to compare myself to Donald Trump, but I have somehow had that quality when I command groups, or when I commanded people at my office. I have Indra is just a little bit out of balance with the debilitated moon, and Mercury is kind of lord of the 8th house. So there's kind of a you can see this kind of hidden kind of quality sometimes in personality. So usually the things you look at most in somebody's chart when you're looking at nakshatras, the first thing you look at the rising sign, you look at the moon sign, you look at the Arudala, you look at the Atmakarika planet, the planet with the highest degrees, is the planet that rules your soul. And so Saturn governs my Atmakarika. It has the highest number of degrees, and Saturn Atmakarika is always about kind of relieving other people's suffering, making sure you don't cause any suffering. And because it's in the constellation of Vishaka, I do that through teaching, because of the connection to Jupiter in the 8th. And counseling, doing astrology reading. So there's all these kind of hidden things that you see in the nakshatras that you might not see if you didn't look at the nakshatras. So just kind of to summarize, so you always study the moons. We'll spend a lot of time on this. I mean, this is my 5-minute overview. We'll study the moon's nakshatra, the pada that it's in. Again, if the moon, there's a difference between, like, my moon is in the Aquarius section of Jyeshtha, which gives it more relationship skills, and that's very true in my life. You study the ascendant nakshatra and the pada that it's in. You study the ascendant Lord's nakshatra and the pada that it's in. You know, as the Atmaparka, you ask, you know, as the dasha Lord's nakshatra. These are the core things. This is your core level cookbook, and we'll practice this for about an hour in the course, because this is like the most core thing that you could learn about nakshatras, is learning how to analyze people's personalities and their strong connections by looking at the nakshatra and nakshatras and their influences. This I'm not going to get into. There are all these kind of hidden qualities to nakshatra relationships. I'm not going to go there now. It's just too complicated for now. So how do we judge nakshatras? You know, is it, I mean, even if you have a bad nakshatra, so let's say, you know, the most difficult nakshatras are Jyeshta, Jyeshta, Ashlesha, maybe Mula is another one that's kind of high on the list. Some of these are the more dreadful qualities. Now, whether they're going to bring out their dreadful qualities or their good qualities, depending on, again, is the nakshatra ruler afflicted? You know, if the nakshatra ruler is conjunct Saturn, if it's conjunct Ketu, if it's conjunct Rahu, it may have a darker energy. If it's conjunct Jupiter, if it's in the 9th house, it's kind of uplifted. So even if it's a bad nakshatra, and I don't like to use the word bad, it may be uplifted because of a good placement. So you have to kind of judge in the same way that we look at houses and where the rulers are placed and where the ruler is connected to. We do the same thing with the nakshatras. And like there's a positive and the challenging side to everything. So let's look at Ashwini. So if K2 is strong in your chart, let's say it's in a good house like the 11th house or the 6th house, or it's, you know, it's conjunct Jupiter, where K2 likes to be conjunct Jupiter. My K2 is very strong, it's conjunct Jupiter. Then you know, then the nakshatra is going to bring out good qualities: steady work, honorable living, confident, doing above average work, reliable, good with finance, good with healing, modest, moderate. So those are the positive qualities of the nakshatra. Now, if K2 were afflicted, let's say it's conjunct Saturn, which really hates being conjunct Saturn, and let's say it's in a bad house like the 12th or some other place, if it really hates the 4th house the most, then it may create a person who has the inability to finish things, stubborn and wild like a racing horse. Ashwini is the horse, so it kind of like darts out of the gate like a crazy person and is out of control. It creates problems. So we'll give you a graph on all the positive and negative qualities of each nakshatra, and then we'll learn how to kind of judge whether they're good or bad. And this gives you really deep information about people, about your life and other people's lives. And then each of the nakshatras is connected to a guna, and you probably know this if you're involved in spirituality. Rajas is connected to action, desire, seeking fulfillment in the material world. It's, you know, I don't want, you know, sometimes we always think sattva is better than rajas and tamas, but no, they all have a place. They all go together. They're called the three gunas. They can't exist without each other. So rajas has the fiery energy that creates action to move us in the world. And the first 9 nakshatras are Rajasic, Ashwini to Ashlesa. So that's Aries through Cancer. Those are more active in seeking this material desire. The next 9 nakshatras, going from Leo through Scorpio, are Tamasic. And Tamasic sometimes has a bad word. Sometimes Tamasic gets translated as lazy or selfish or dark. But sometimes there's more, you're more kind of interested in yourself and immediate gratification. You're not thinking about others. Tamasic nakshatras are more ignorant in that respect. They're kind of lazy and selfish and ego-centered, and that's what makes them tamasic. They still may be very successful in the social realm, but they may have an underlying agenda. Sattva are the nakshatras from Sagittarius to Pisces, and from Mula to Revati, and they're connected to purity, truth, reality. Sattvic people happy people, aspiring for higher self or spiritual knowledge. They're calm and collected in relationship, and they have a sense of fairness and love. So very quickly, when you look at somebody's chart, you can see are all their planets in the Rajasic part of the zodiac, in Rajasic nakshatras from Aries to Cancer, in the Tamasic side from Leo to Scorpio, or are they in the Sattvic side from Sagittarius to Pisces? And then you get the transits happening every year. So in the spring, the planets are kind of moving through the Sattvic nakshatras, and Saturn is now in a Sattvic nakshatra. And so there's this whole kind of movement, or maybe I need to take a meditation class or study astrology or something, because you've got all this kind of energy moving towards Revati and in the spring. So the transits kind of also then reinforce these energies, and in transit, the planets kind of channel the energy that they're moving through. So with transits, if you've taken my transit class, we're always looking at the transits of the ascendant lord first. So if you're ruled by Aries, you're looking at the transits of Mars. If you're Taurus, you're looking at the transits of Venus. So we're most interested in the transits of the ascendant lord, and then the transits of the dasha lord, are the second most important thing to look at. And so, for example, Mars, which is my secondary chart ruler. So Mars is currently in Sagittarius. It went into Mula Nakshatra. It will stay there for 3 weeks. So it's channeling Ketu's energy. And so where's Ketu? Ketu's in Capricorn, and Ketu's in Shravana. And then so there's this whole matrix that kind of gets connected in transit. So when we study transits, we'll see how you can kind of interpret the mental energies that are afflicting you when you understand these kind of matrices that are created. But this is very powerful knowledge, because if I didn't understand Ketu, Mula Nakshatra is really kind of difficult. It kind of can take away material things. It can kind of cause disaster and death and sickness and illness and stuff like that. And Saturn was in there from October until the beginning of March, and I had 6 or 7 friends die during that, and people were really suffering. And you could really understand when that was going to end. Saturn went out of Mula Nakshatra on March 3rd, and things are lighter because Saturn is now channeling Venus's energy, and Venus is exalted. So suddenly Saturn, the Karaka for work, people are a little bit happier about work, or people are a little bit happier about responsibility, because it's not connected to Ketu. Saturn is not connected to Ketu in transit. It's connected to Venus now. So there's this whole kind of thing that happens with the transits. Now the moon, with the transits, the moon changes every day. So every day you can experience each nakshatra, and if you should watch this. Where is the moon going every day? What nakshatra is it in? What is the meaning of that nakshatra? What am I feeling in that transit? Now, and you also have your own personal matrix. Like, for example, whenever the moon goes into Ardra, which is an 8th house transit for me, it's also a Rahu nakshatra, and it's also a bad Tarabala number for me. Whenever I have the moon going through Ardra nakshatra in Gemini, I'm always kind of cautious about, planning anything really important that day, because, really crazy things usually happen. When I was trading in the commodity industry, I would do really well, and then the moon would go into Ardra, and I didn't really understand any of the stuff at that time. And I remember losing, a quarter of my trading account on one day, and it was just because it was, that craving of Rahu, and it was just a bad transit. So understanding the nakshatras and the transits is very revealing in your life. The sun moves through a new nakshatra every 13 days. You see me writing about that in my column. The Mars takes about 3 weeks to go through a nakshatra. Rahu and Ketu take 6 months to go through Nakshatra. And if it's a bad Nakshatra for you, it's going to have a big influence. Saturn maybe take about 9 months to go through the Nakshatra. And Saturn almost takes 11 to 12 months to go through a whole Nakshatra. So these big transits, if you have to understand their qualities and what they do for you, and they give you a lot of good information. Talked a little bit about tracing the Nakshatra in a chart. We'll learn how to do this. This would be very revealing for understanding how, if all the planets in your chart kind of go back to Jupiter, then that becomes like the core planet in your life and the core, planet of your kind of purpose. If all the Nakshatra is going to trace back to Saturn and everything falls apart in your life all the time, you kind of can see that in the Nakshatra matrix. So very kind of revealing information. We'll learn how to do that in one of the lessons. I talked a little bit about this already. The Nakshatras are connected to the dashas, and the periods and how they unfold. And we'll spend at least an hour learning how you can get more detailed information about predicting your life because of the house connections. And then we talked about the Navatara, which are these numbers counted from your birth star, and then there are all these special nakshatras that turn up in different places. And you can do charts of this, and you can learn how to time people's lives. This stuff works really well. I mean, when people are going through Sadi Sat and Saturn's going through their 25th nakshatra, and they're calling me and they're like in tears, and I say, Saturn's going into the 26th nakshatra next week, and it's going to be in your 27th nakshatra. You're going to get about a 2-year break in your Sadi Sat, and you're going to pull yourself together. Just hang in there another week. You can kind of see this in these special nakshatras, and so they're very powerful for understanding these, and we'll learn those in the class. And we'll learn how the Shakti is connected to the planets. And so when the planets go through the nakshatras, they bring some of the Shakti and the energy of those devas, and that it can really help us understand how influences happen in our life. We talked a little bit about nakshatra and caste already. This is kind of interesting. If you look on the chart that I sent you, your caste, they kind of, there's 7 castes. There's actually things from farmer. Chitra is kind of a farmer, and they're butcher caste, which is actually, in Vedic society there were no butchers. Butchers were kind of the ritualistic people who kind of made sacrifices, so they were kind of priests. So there are 7 castes in the Vedic system, and the caste system is not really used very much, but the caste system can be very revealing for showing you about your personality. For example, my Anuradha Nakshatra, which is my rising sign, is connected to the Shudra class, which is the servant class. And even though I'm a Brahmin, because I'm a teacher, I'm a spiritual teacher, I've been teaching meditation and yoga and astrology for years. I mean, there's no question that I'm, in my dharma being a Brahmin, but because it's my caste nature is Anuradha, it's connected to serving, and my whole life has always been about serving. I mean, I put these astrology classes together. It takes about 7 or 8 hours to put together and teach these classes, and I just have to do it. And if you've been my student, or if you become my student, you see like I'm always there for you, serving you, and I'm like going out of my way sending you articles and putting together these elaborate courses for you. And I do it because my life is about service. I used to do that when I taught meditation I did it with my yoga students. It's just how my nakshatra functions in the caste nature. It brings out my serving attitude in work. And so we'll explore how to use the caste nature with nakshatras, and nobody teaches that. I mean, sometimes these courses come together because I'm mystified by some of these things, and you can't find the answers in the book. And then I'm a researcher with Jupiter in the 8th, and I just do copious research until and I have a network of colleagues until I find the answers to what does cast really mean in your chart, and how do you use it? And so we'll share that secret with you. We talked about the naughty techniques of prediction. We'll spend some time with that. There are other secrets of nakshatras that we'll go over. There are a bunch of slokas from naughty astrology. There's Jaimini astrology, there's Parashari astrology, and there's naughty astrology. And naughty astrology is actually the oldest form of astrology. Saptarishis has been teaching a lot of naughty astrology. And they have this kind of ancient slokas. And we'll learn, I don't know if we'll do all 42 of them, but we'll do the most important ones. There are 42 slokas for prediction with the naughty techniques. And so here's an example. If Ashwini is afflicted, again, we learned afflicted would mean Ketu is afflicted in the chart. Then planets in Ashwini Nakshatra or planets connected to Ketu, the chart lord of Nakshatra, may lead to being able to reach being not able to reach a place on time. So people who are perpetually tardy it may be because Ketu is afflicted in their chart and they have planets connected to Ashwini Nakshatra. So I'll show you an example here. Marilyn Monroe, I should have pulled up her chart. She's got a couple of planets in Ashwini, and during her period when she had Venus in Ashwini, and during that time period she was actually fired by Fox, Metro Goldwyn Fox, because she was always chronically late to work and not showing up, and that was, you could see that because of Ashwini Nakshatra and the transits and the dashas that were going on connected to having that affliction. And so there are 42 naughty techniques for predicting these nakshatras, and there's more than 42, but we'll actually only have time to kind of practice this with the first 9 nakshatras. So we talked about nakshatras and devatas and Puranic lessons. How can we translate this into modern psychology? And I think for example, let's look at Mula Nakshatra. So I have a deep connection to Mula Nakshatra because I've got Rahu there, and I'm in a Rahu period. And Mula Nakshatra, is connected to the goddess Niriti, and Niriti she kind of destroys ignorance. She's kind of destroying the material world so that you move toward your higher values and discover God and God realization. And so transits and planets connected to Niriti can be, and when their dashas come up, be very difficult because suddenly things fall apart. I mean, just to get personal with you, I had a very successful business in the financial industry, and I had a big, beautiful house. And my Rahu period hit. Rahu's in Ketu's Nakshatra, and things started falling apart. I lost my house in the housing crisis. My business income fell apart in the financial industry, and I suddenly moved out of town. I had surgery. So it was kind of like when the Riti hit with Ketu in my Rahu period. It's kind of like I was being challenged to move more towards spirituality, which has happened. And it really did lead to kind of a deeper career change. I still have my financial business, but I'm more interested in teaching astrology and doing charts and helping people. And I'm happy that I lost my house because I wasn't really, it wasn't serving me anymore. And I actually moved and have a better life. So sometimes the Riti, the mythology is kind of forcing you into kind of discovering your roots. The Riti is all about roots. It's the galactic center in Western astrology, and it forces you to kind of go back to your essence. And so I had a very difficult time as soon as I went into my Rahu period when Niriti got activated, and Niriti is still kind of working. I'm actually friends with her now, but I think you have to kind of understand how these deities and the mythology connected to them are kind of transforming your life at times. So I think it's really kind of exciting material. Nakshatras also are like connected to the elements. So, the signs are connected to the elements. The fire signs, Aries, Leos, and Sagittarius, etc. The nakshatras also are connected to the elements. So the first 5 are the earth element, the second 5 are the water element, the second 5 are the fire element. The next, some of them have 6 because there's 27 nakshatras. And then Anuradha to Shravana is the air element, Dhanishta to Revata is the space element. So there's a way to do a lot of complex prediction and to diagnose people's lives looking at the elements in the nakshatras. And so this is kind of advanced work that we'll do for an hour, probably in less than 9. But I'm just kind of revealing all this stuff to give you some idea how much stuff there is with nakshatras, and there'll probably be a nakshatra 2 course because the ocean of Jyotish is just kind of unlimited. And if you're overwhelmed already, we will go slower, we will go deeper, we will get you to practice. We will use a lot of examples, but this is our ocean lesson, the ocean in a drop. There's a thing called Pada Nakshatra, and this connects the nakshatras to the daily almanac, to the Panchanga, and this is how amazing Jyotish is. I mean, and there's a whole sequence that we'll learn. Like if you start with Rohini, which is in Taurus, on a Wednesday, and you go through the 7 days of the week, there are 4 nakshatras. So if you're born on a day of the week and you're born into a certain nakshatra, which is in a certain order, then there's certain kind of hidden karmic problems that are going to come up in those dashas and with major transits. And this is very kind of hidden information that you might not normally think of. And this is why people, when they do wrong predictions, it's like, they're not seeing some of these kind of hidden things in the nakshatras. So, we need to kind of be aware of some of these kind of hidden things. So there's some timing techniques that we'll learn maybe in week 9, I think, about Pada Nakshatra and the connection between the day of the week that you're born and the nakshatra sequences. It's quite fascinating. We'll also look, I'm adding a lesson, I haven't put it on the syllabus yet, on Vamsha, which is the divisional chart connection to the nakshatras. The Vamsha chart is D27, and that means that each sign is divided into 1 minute, 1.6 degrees and 40 minutes. So that means that every degree of the zodiac is connected. Every degree in 6 minutes of the zodiac is connected to a nakshatra. Now, to me, this is absolutely fascinating because it's like the hidden energies in your mind and the way that shows kind of the hidden strengths and weaknesses of the mind. So, for the most part, in this divisional chart, you look at the moon and Jupiter and Mars, and I'll explain why. But so, for example, my moon is at 2630 degrees Scorpio, and if we look here, if we look at this is the D27. These are the devas connected with each chart. So if we look at my moon, we see that my moon is connected to Shadabisha in the nakshatra matrix. Now, since we're going to be learning the nakshatras, learning the D27, it becomes very easy because Shadabishak is all about healing. And it's got that restless mental energy of Rahu, but it's always about kind of healing. And so my moon, when we look at a very kind of deep level in Jyeshta Nakshatra, because on the microscopic level it's connected to Shadabishak, it has this kind of strong healing and transformational energy, which has always been the story of my life. I mean, I've always been very involved I've been involved in healing for 40 years, and it's nurturing kind of healing, the moon kind of being there. So always looking for cures and remedies. I'm teaching this remedy class. I'm actually hosting this remedy class because I'm trying to bring all these great scholars together to teach about healing. So when we look deep in my chart at this microscopic level, you get this coming up in the D27 chart. So it's quite fascinating. These are the divisions in the D27 chart. Other topics, there are other topics that we'll do, and we're just about done with our presentation. There's connections between the lunar days and the nakshatras in different formas. This is called Graha Jamana Nakshatra. We'll have maybe an hour lesson on that. And then we'll do a beginning lesson on Sarvabhata Chakra, which I'll show you. And this is a whole course, and I'm not even a master of it, but I want to introduce it to you, and I'll show it to you. It's totally fascinating. Okay. That's not the right pages. Okay, so this Sarvabhata Chakra, and there are other, we're used to kind of like the natal charts. The Vedic people have all these kind of advanced ways of like doing charts, and Sarvabhata Chakra is a way of looking and predicting your chart by putting the nakshatras around the sky and here on the outside. And then there are kind of different, what are called aspects between nakshatras. So like if Jupiter goes into nakshatra number Uttarashada Nakshatra, it aspects my sun, even though you couldn't possibly see that, if you looked at it any other way. And when you do advanced levels of prediction, you can predict all kinds of things from Sarvabhata Chakra, and it's quite fascinating. When I first learned this, I was just like totally mesmerized on it, because it really shows a lot of hidden timing that you couldn't possibly learn any other place. And this is because you're looking at the nakshatras and the numbers. I have it set for the ascendant, but let's see. So basically, you set it for the moon, which is my Jamana Nakshatra. So once we learn Navatara, we can then just see, we can see the relationships between the planets going through the nakshatras and the numbers, and then how the aspects are connecting different areas of the chart. So this is, we'll spend 2 hours on this. It's possible that we won't even, we might have to put this in Nakshatra 2 class, because it really needs about 4 lessons, but I thought it'd be important to kind of introduce you to it, and I think it's kind of fascinating. So all of you are probably wondering that you're thinking that this class is way too advanced for me. How am I possibly going to get through this class? It's too encyclopedic. It's too difficult. My first class is always like this ocean. I'm this kind of encyclopedia, and I just kind of shoved 11 lessons into an overview to give you an idea of what you could learn in our Secrets of the Nakshatra class. If you're interested in signing up for the class, it's available on my website, and you can just click the PayPal. I have a special going if you sign up by tomorrow. There's a $20 reduction. It's $275. Sometimes people need a payment plan. I could set up PayPal invoices for you if you need a payment plan. But love to have you in the class. I'm going to open the course up to questions. And again, I'm sorry if I rushed through so much material. I can be a little bit encyclopedic, and I always say that the ocean of Jyotish is, you can go to the beach and you can go tiptoe on the beach and just play with the waves. I mean, you could also learn to become a scuba diver, and you can become the ocean. The more you study Jyotish, the only way you really get to become very good at this is that you spend enough time with it, and then the devas and the planets kind of talk to you and give you the answers. So you can become the ocean, because the Encyclopedia of Jyotish is a life study, but it's very exciting, and hopefully I didn't blow you away with too much, but basically there's it's a very rich topic. People don't teach it very much, and I just find it very exciting, and I'm excited to share it with you. So I'm going to open up to questions. I've got a question from Alan Davies. Okay, he's got a comment. He thinks it's great. Mohini wanted to know what Pushkara Nakshatras are. Basically, they're called Pushkara Padas. They're special sections of the zodiac that have hidden creativity energy in them. I'll give you a list of them. They're basically the Vamshapadas that have kind of hidden power in them, and they act like an exalted planets going in there act like exalted because they're so powerful. I will do the North and the South Indian format. I actually do both. I'll send out a survey. I do realize I encourage my students to learn both because inevitably you have to. Sometimes you pick up a book and it was published in the North, and they don't bother with the South Indian format. I learned both when I started Jyotish, and it's valuable to know both. But I will, when I do charts, I will put both up for people. I'm equally comfortable. I'm ambidextrous with North or South. But thank you for reminding me. I have, there's a hidden, somebody who knows Sri Jyoti Star, I need this control that allows you to automatically put up both, and I have to find that control. But I know how to switch them easily. The question is, how much chart analysis will you do in the class? Well, what my colleagues are doing and what I'm learning from feedback is that my PowerPoint presentations are sent out ahead of time. And if you read through the PowerPoints, you get the main knowledge points, and that the class should be spent more on practicing. So I try to use your charts to practice on, because if you understand it in your chart, then you're going to get it and find it in other people's charts. I will bring in famous people because sometimes you can do that. Now, it's hard to do famous people with nakshatras in some cases because you're dealing with, you definitely can do it in the prediction section. When you're dealing with the psychology section, it may be a little bit too subjective. So we will have to bring examples in. I didn't do very many examples today except for my chart, but we definitely do examples. Yes, somebody else asked for the South Indian style Afi. Yes, I will definitely do that for people. Okay, I'm using Sri Jyoti Star, and Sri Jyoti Star is my favorite software. It does a lot of hidden things that a lot of other software doesn't do. If you don't, if you don't have much of a budget, you can use Jagannath Hora, which is the best free software that's available. If you do have a budget, I think Sri Jyoti Star is my preferred software. It's about $360 or something like that. I've had it since 1999, so I'm kind of jaded about it. But it does do a lot of advanced things that you can't do with some of the other software. If you want to sign up for the class, you just have to go, the website, Applied Vedic Astrology, does have the special price. You just have to click through and the special price comes through. Special price is listed on the website, so you can just click through and it will give you the special price. And I will change that on Tuesday, but you haven't, to get the special price, you can sign up on Monday. I'd love to have you in the course. Okay. Okay. Let's see. Other questions? I think I got them all. Davies. I think Alan has a question. I didn't. Did I get Alan's question? Yeah. So, funnily enough, um, as a joke, my nickname is Buck. I don't use it very much. I actually like it, but I generally go by Barry. It's kind of funny that when somebody programmed go to webinar for me, they put in my nickname and I can't get it out of there. So I've been kind of but that's my nickname. Um, um, but you can call me Barry. There's very few people that I let me call Buck, but just so you know that. But it's okay if you. Other questions? I can unmute you if you have a question. Again, I will send a copy of the videotape to you. There were actually 43 people that signed up to hear the videotape. I think we had 18 people come live today. I will send the videotape out to everybody if you want to listen to it again. If you want the PowerPoint presentation, I can send that to you also, and that because we did go over a lot of the material fast. But so I'll send you the videotape and the PowerPoint presentation, and it'd be great to have you in the class. The class is not meeting absolutely every week because we have Easter weekend and April 1st, and good chance I'm going somewhere that weekend. I have 3 places I need to go that weekend, and you all need a break for Easter weekend, and everybody's kind of traveling anyway, and spring break and stuff like that. There'll be another weekend in May that we're off. I'm moving my home. I have a couple other trips to do and speaking at the United Astrology Conference in Chicago. So there'll be another week that we have off. So basically, I think it's 10 there. This is the first class, and there's 10 additional classes that we'll have between now and June 1st, and there'll be 2 weeks off during that period. And again, if you're interested in Nakshatras, you should definitely pick up Camilla Sutton's book or Prash Trivedi's book. Those are the 2 books, because you should read about one nakshatra every night, and then that way, in 27 nights, you'll know you'll at least be familiar with the nakshatras, and then put your flashcards together, because if you learn the language of nakshatras, then it'll be real easy to kind of pull stuff out of your head. Well, how large is the class size? That's a good question, Alan. I have had, my classes have been anywhere from like 8 to 15 people. What happens is even if you have 15 people, then on any given class, only 10 of them come because, somebody's traveling and somebody's got invited to a restaurant and stuff like that. So I would, the past classes that I've taught, even the bigger ones, at most I have like 10 live people per class. I currently have 9 people who have paid for this class. I do expect out of all the other people watching that we'll have some more people, but I don't think, I don't know how many people will come in any one class. I do try to, even if you don't come to, if you do come to class, I try to definitely go over your chart every week for an example. If you don't go to class, I sometimes, if I have 15 people that are in the class, I don't always have time to go over 15 charts. But I do, so there's an advantage to coming to class live. Okay, more questions? We still have 5 minutes. Again, if you're not interested in my class and you're interested in some of my other classes, you can look on the webinar tab. I just did an exciting class on secrets of the houses. It's going to turn into a great book. I did a class on relationship. There will not be a class next week. Thank you. That's a good question. Mohini is asking. Next week is up. Next week's my birthday. And I'm teaching a meditation class, and I've been kind of teaching 2 classes a week for a number of weeks here, up until a few weeks ago. So next week's my rest week, and except for the remedy class, which I'm not teaching, I'm hosting that. There's no class next week, and my birthday is next week, so I'm taking off next week. So it gives you 2 weeks to start reading about nakshatras and work on your flashcards. And the next live class my goal with class is not to kind of repeat stuff that's in books, which is why I kind of encourage you. Sometimes I'll give you a lot of material. I call it cookbook material, which means I'll give it to you on the slideshow, but I won't go over it in class, so you can kind of print it out and you have it as a reference guide. But the classes should be used to kind of practice principles, to look at your charts, to look at famous people's charts, and to go over the main points. So I'm here for 3 more minutes. I have an art open. I look forward to seeing you in my class, this class or the next one. And if you like my columns, you'll enjoy my book, which is on Amazon if you haven't bought it yet. I never understood why people push their books, but this book was pure service. I mean, it's like it was 400 hours of writing and 200 hours of editing, and it's an absolutely amazing book. No one's put anything out like that, and it's just like I do it because I love astrology and I had to kind of help serve people. But if I thought about it, one of my students helped me edit it, and if she hadn't, thank you, Jamie, I never would have gotten through finishing it. And now we have 2 more books coming out this year, because I'll have some help with transcribing my classes. My classes become books because they're that deep. And The Secret of the Houses course is now going to become a book, because the material is really rich and deep, and nobody else has anything out there like that. So I like to put together these courses that are beyond what you normally will find reading a book, or what you'll find in an article. So we're going to go deep. Scorpios like to go deep. We're deep divers. Okay, final questions. It's 4:58. Okay, the name of the book is you can look on Amazon under Barry. My book is on the cover of is on the homepage of my website, appliedvedicastrology.com. And so it's called the Vedic Astrology 2018-2009 Transit Guide. It's more than a transit guide. It's not an ephemeris. It's got all kinds of articles. And actually, I recommend it because for those of you who haven't taken my classes, a lot of material about Vedic astrology is in that book, and it's very. Those of you who like my columns, I'm a good writer. I'm a poet, so I turn astrology into poetry. So I think you'll enjoy it. But it's on the homepage of my website. If you look up my name on Amazon.com, Barry Rosen, you'll also find it. Hard copy is more expensive on Amazon. The PDF file, which downloads immediately, is on my website. Okay, so it is 5 o'clock. We are going to end on time. And thank you all again for coming. And if you need any help with anything, I'm here. My next class will be on Vedic psychology in June, and we'll have a preview for that also. Anyway, have a wonderful day. We'll talk to you when we talk to you. Take care. Blessings.